And welcome everybody. It's great to have you here. Our objectives in this video are pretty darn specific. So if you're brand new to the channel, glad you're here. My name is Keith Barker. I'm a double CCIE, love teaching. Our focus here on this channel is entry-level technologies, focusing on the CCNA 200-301. And our objectives for this video are three things. Number one, I wanted to follow up and show you the topology for my sniffing lab. So if you were building a Raspberry Pi, following the instructions, I can show you what does work and doesn't work. I've got a little tidbit on that. And then secondly, I'd like to talk with you about DTP. Give me a D, give me a T, give me a P. What do you get? You get a very insecure opportunity for somebody to hack your network. The dynamic trunk protocol, or is it dynamic trunking protocol? Either way, we know and love it as DTP. And then third, I'd like to take a look at how we can protect those ports from being taken advantage of. So let me start off with the tail end of the Kali Linux saga. If you've been following that, I want to share with you a very inexpensive way to do inline monitoring or mirroring of two ports. So let's take a look at this right here. One question I get all the time is about, lots of alerts going off, is about what pen do you use to write on top of your screens and such. And I use this little tool right here. It's called Epic Pen. It's very affordable, and it just writes on top of whatever. So there you go. Get that one out of the way. All right, I'll move, speaking of getting it out of the way. So here's my topology that I use when I'm doing sniffing. And let me walk you through this. So I've got the Kali Linux box right here. And this could be a Kali Linux laptop, or in my case, it's a Raspberry Pi running Kali Linux. The previous two videos, I gotta slow down a little bit, make sure I'm heard. I'm excited. I want to make sure we get through all the content. In the previous two videos on Kali Linux and the Raspberry Pi, I walk you through specifically on this Raspberry Pi. It's a 3B plus, the one I used, of how to set it up and get it going. And so what I'm using is the Ethernet 0, the built-in Ethernet port, as a management interface, so I can remotely connect to it on that port. And then I've also connected two, in the USB ports, two little USB dongles, and they go from USB to an Ethernet connector. And those were less than $15, I believe. And all you need is fast Ethernet. I also tried it with 2 gigabit options here. But this device, which we're going to talk about in just a moment, if you plug the switch in a server or the devices between it, they're going to auto-negotiate down to 100 megabits per second. So this little $12 dongle here, our sniffing apparatus, doesn't support gigabit. All right, so what I have is I have Ethernet. So Ethernet 0 is the built-in interface. So I'm going to remotely open up my SSH sessions to the Kali Linux box, and I can also connect to it with VNC that we talked about in the previous videos through the management interface. You could also do it wirelessly. It has a built-in Wi-Fi adapter, so you could actually connect over it wireless as well. And then I'm using these 2 additional interfaces. So in this device right here, this is like under $15 US. And what you do is you take your devices that were connected to each other. So if I was going to a switch to a server, or a switch to a switch, or whatever the connections were, you plug one side into the black connector, the other side into the other black connector, and they go along their business. Now it's not going to support a gigabit. I tried hard coding it. I could not get it to support a gigabit, but it did go down to 100 megabits per second. So the traffic flow still is, if they're trunking and all the other traffic works like it normally would. So that's great. And then each of these ports replicates one side of the conversation. So if you want to see both sides, you want to see traffic going northbound and southbound through this interface or through this adapter, that's what these 2 connectors going to Ethernet 1 and Ethernet 2 are. In fact, I need to modify that because it's not really Ethernet 2 anymore. It's Ethernet 3, and I'll tell you why in just a moment. So I have them connected here, and then when I go to my capture device with Wireshark, I just tell it I'm going to use Ethernet 1 and Ethernet 3 as I take a look at my notes. Yeah, that's actually factual. And then I just start capturing, and then I can capture all the traffic that's there. So we did, in the previous videos, we took a look at how to build and connect and set that up. And what I would like to do is, let's go check it out and verify that's still in place, and just give you a quick recap of that. This will just take a few seconds if it cooperates. For all the details on VNC and remote access, please check out the previous video. And let me scale that down a little bit. Let me log on as root on this image of Kali Linux that we did in the previous videos. The default password is still tour, root backwards. And then I will size this up so we can all see it. And almost there. That'll work. That'll work. Okay, so once we have the desktop access to this Raspberry Pi, also this Raspberry Pi, I'm using a USB port that was available on one of the routers. I just took the USB to the power, and it's good to go. And then the little yellow and black scanning thing where you plug the Ethernet ports in, that's passive. It uses no electricity whatsoever. All right, so again, here is the remote desktop courtesy of VNC of the Raspberry Pi. I've got, oh, and one really great thing to do is verify where your ports are and which, if you have multiple USB dongles plugged in, you'd want to find out which ones are which. So here it is CLI. Let me just make that a little bit smaller. Almost there. All right. So here at a CLI, just do at a shell prompt, just do a if config. And this will show you your interfaces and their layer 2 addresses. So you can identify, and they're also labeled too. So if you look at the little dongles on the back, they'll have the MAC address. And so here I've got my built-in Ethernet, which is Ethernet 0. That's the one that has the IP address. That's how we're connecting to this device. Yay. And then we have Ethernet 1 and Ethernet 2 and Ethernet 3. 3 dongles that I connected. 2 are gigabit, one's fast Ethernet, but unfortunately with what I'm looking at, it doesn't matter because my my little yellow and black dongle thing will only support 100 megabits. So if we look at the MAC addresses, which I did before I plugged them in, this is showing me based on their MAC addresses that Ethernet 1 and Ethernet 3 are both in line with this bad boy right here. So getting out my pen again. So that's Ethernet 1 and Ethernet 3 right there that are connected here. And then Ethernet 2 I have plugged into the switch on gig 0/15. Let me erase gig 0/15. That, and I want to show you a tool that you can use here in a moment that could compromise a switch and then show you how to solve that and protect the switch port so it just doesn't say, yeah, I'll be a trunk and let you have access to every possible VLAN I know about. Because by default, it will, all courtesy of the tools on a Kali Linux or any kind of, or any Linux operating system that runs the appropriate attack tool. All right, so that's how those are connected. And let me bring that back. All right, so now I know what those are, and then we can run Wireshark if you want to. I'll just type in W-I-R-E. This is on the Kali Linux box, the Kali Pi, and that will bring up the graphical user interface for Packet Tracer. Packet Tracer. Packet Tracer is a great tool from Cisco. This brings up the graphical interface for Wireshark, and if you want to collect the traffic on, there we go, on Ethernet 1 and 3, as we do here, here's how we do it. You click on Capture right here, and then from here, you click on Ethernet 1, hold down the Control key, click on Ethernet 3, and then go ahead and click on Start, and that's how you get that. So one more time, because it's not that intuitive. Click on Capture, and then with the Control key selected, select the interfaces you want to capture on, and then I'm capturing on both sides of that little $12 mirroring tool that I have injected as part of my network. So we'll click on Start, and while that's going, if we go to a switch, and this is a switch I have in the mix over there. Let me bring it down a little bit. I'm going to reconnect to this. I timed out. Restart session. K Barker. And let's do a ping to 10. I think I can go to 111.0.1. That's going to be over VLAN 111, so we can see the 802.1q tags. And then we do a ping to 10.222.0.2. That goes over a VLAN called 222, so we'll see those tags as well, and all those show up, all that traffic shows up in the packet capture. So we stop the capture, and we look at any one of these packets down here. If we look at the Ethernet header, and then right after that we have the 802.1q header, and that identifies the VLAN. So the 802.1q tag is identifying what VLAN those frames are associated with. All right, great, great, great. So I'm going to go ahead and close that, maybe. And there we go. I'm going to quit without saving. So that's a little recap and an overall topology of how I'm doing capturing. Now, if you have a switch that supports SPAN, switch port analyzer, you can also replicate the traffic from a VLAN or from a set of ports or from a single interface over to where your monitoring device is. That also works if your switch supports it. So with switch port analyzer, SPAN. Now, what I want to show you is on this switch, in fact, let's bring back the switch. On this switch right here, if we do a show interface status, on this port right here, I have connected to it. Oh, and I should have used my gigabit port. All right, I have 2 gigabit dongles and I have one that's just fast Ethernet, and I plugged in the fast Ethernet. This is coming from one of my ports, my Ethernet ports on my Kali Pi to this port. And if we take a look at this port in detail on the switch, it's up. It's auto-negotiated 100 megabits per second. And if we do a show interface gig 0/15 switch port, that's a great command, by the way. They'll show you the switch port characteristics for that port. And what this says right here is that it's dynamic. It'll do negotiation of trunking is on, which means it's running DTP. That means, is it an access port or is it a trunk port right now? Let's take a look. Show VLAN brief. And if we look for gig 0/15, actually that previous screen also shows the current operational state. In fact, let's go back there. Show interface gig 0/15 switch port. And operational mode right now, it is an access port. So it's operating as an access port, but it's willing to dynamically negotiate. So we do a show VLAN brief. There's gig 0/15. That's off the screen. There's gig 0/15 right here. Make sure you can see that on the far right. And so it's currently an access port in VLAN 1, but it's willing. I'm willing to party. I'll do it. I'll do it. So this is a really bad state from a security perspective to leave your ports in, because by default, all the ports are in VLAN 1. By default, in this model switch, all the ports are willing to dynamically negotiate whether it's going to be a trunk port or not. So currently, it's not a trunk. If it shows up here with show VLAN brief, it's not a trunk. If we do a show interface trunk, make sure I'm getting this all on camera here. If we do a show interface trunk, it says, Keith, there's just too many more commands that start with TR. What are they? All right, there we go. Show interface trunk. This shows our current trunks, 11 and 13. Not 15, it's not a trunk. It's an access port at the moment. It's operating that way, but it's willing to dynamically negotiate. So if we went back to our Kali Pi, now, you know what, even if you don't have your Kali Linux box with remote graphical user interface access to it, there's a lot of great hack tools that you don't need the GUI. In fact, let's do it without the GUI, and then you can do it with the GUI or without the GUI. So let me do this. All right, let's go to a command prompt for the Kali Pi. So I'm just going to SSH in, and we'll go in as root, and the password is tour. And I think you're going to love this, by the way. Oh, on this switch, I'm going to do terminal monitor because I'm remotely connected and I want to see log messages, console messages. If you don't do that, they don't show up. Like, wow, it's very quiet out there today. So calm day at sea, sir. No, you just don't have terminal monitor on and you're remotely connected. All right, so now it's on. We can see log messages. Going back to our Kali Pi at the command prompt, we can do an apt-get install of Yersinia. Yersinia has been out there forever, and I've used it forever. Well, never use any attack tools on networks that are not yours. So let me see that first of all. So if we just apt-get install Yersinia, it's going to go out and check. And I installed it about 30 minutes ago, so it's already running the current latest, greatest version, so it's all good. But that's how you add it to your Kali Linux on the Kali Linux we built in the last couple of videos. All right, so we've got Yersinia, and if you want to use the graphical user interface, let me get this a little bit bigger here. And with many tools, if you just type in the command like Yersinia, and you're not sure about the syntax, you can do a -h, sometimes it's -h. And this is just showing you what the options are here. So we have -G for graphical mode, and then we have -I for interactive mode. And I love that because you don't have to have a graphical user interface, and you can still use this attack tool. It's pretty convenient. So let's do that. So we'll do Yersinia space -I. And earlier I ran this, and the screen wasn't big enough, so I just stretched the screen or made it bigger, the terminal window, and it could run. So a couple basics here. Number one, never do this on any network that's not yours. Get permission from those in authority if you're on another network. And these could be very devastating, including some very easy denial of service attacks that can happen on a router or a switch just like instantly, including flooding CDP messages. And the router's like, all the CPU is taken up and they just go belly up. I mean, they can't process packets because they're just so busy. All right, so I want to teach you a couple basics here. And then the intention here is so I can show you how to solve this on the switch so your switch isn't a victim. So you're going to go ahead and use the question mark. and I press question mark and I got nothing. So I'll hit the question mark again, and this is giving you the question mark or H gives you the help screen, and this has a decode for all the commands. So my problem is that I see it's using Ethernet 0 up here, and my interface is Ethernet 2 that I have plugged into port gig 0/15. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Q. That removes that screen. And in that help that I got with the question mark, also by just typing in H for help, I'm going to hit I for interfaces. And then you just hit the letter of the interface you want to enable or disable. So I don't need Ethernet 0 because that's my management interface. So I'm going to hit A to turn that off. And I do want Ethernet 2, which is physically plugged into port gig 0/15 on the switch. So I want to turn that on. So I want to go to Ethernet 2. I'll hit C, and that just toggles it on. Wax on, wax off. And there's a joke in there, and we'll just leave it alone. All right, so now that Ethernet 2 is my interface, I'll hit Q. That brings me back to the main menu. Up at the top, it's saying, okay, Ethernet 2 is going to be your interface you're using because you specified it. And if we wanted to compromise the switch based on dynamic trunk protocol, which it's ready to party because it was enabled, meaning if I get the right messages, I will become a trunk with you. And if I'm a trunk and you have 40 VLANs, the attacker then has access to all 40 VLANs. No need to go through a router, just you're directly connected to all VLANs. It's a party. So if you have access control lists that are controlling traffic from one VLAN to the other and their respective IP networks, from one network to the next, the hacker can jump in with a trunk port, be on any VLAN they want, carve out any IP address they want to use, and then reach those devices on that local network without any access control list. So convenient. So to do that, to see the types of protocol attacks we can do, we're going to do a G. This is also in the help. I just looked at it. So hit G, and it says choose the protocol you want to use. Oh, good ones. So we're going to use dynamic trunk protocol, dynamic trunking protocol, DTP. And what we're going to do is this attack tool running on the Kali Linux or Kali Pi and using Ethernet 2 is going to send out negotiation messages and establish a trunk with that switch. And the switch is going to say, okay. And we can see that with the switch interface. So I'm going to, DTP is highlighted. I'll press enter. And now I'm going to hit X. So within DTP, now it's asking me with X, like execute an attack. What do you want to do? So I have two options here. 0, send DTP packet, or 1, enable trunking. Get it done. So I'm going to hit 0, but before I do, I'm going to hit 1. I'm going to go for the whole trunking. But before I do, let me bring up a console to our switch. There we go. So here's our switch right there. I'm going to move this up just a little bit. That way we can see the fun activity on the switch in the bottom screen. So currently, gig 0/15 is not a trunk, but it will be with one press of a key. So I'll go ahead and hit 1, and see the console messages at the bottom. Hey, I'm negotiating. So now if we go to switch and do a show interface trunk, look at that. Gig 0/15 is now supporting VLAN 192. You might say, well, one VLAN. You know, one VLAN on the trunk, what's the attacker going to do? Well, look at this. This says VLANs allowed and active in management domain, all these VLANs. And what that means is that after spanning tree decides that there's no loop off that port, gig 0/15, it's going to go ahead and allow all the VLANs on gig 0/15 on the trunk. So we'll give it a moment, hit the up arrow key, show interface trunk. There we go. Mr. Attacker, merry days to you. Happy holidays. Have access to any one of those VLANs and their corresponding subnets. And then the attacker, just by eavesdropping on the traffic, can determine what those networks are, carve out his own IP address, or he could get an IP address from a DHCP server. Hey, thanks, Mr. DHCP server, supporting VLAN 50. I really wanted an IP address. Appreciate that. So whether we're delivering that DHCP traffic via a relay agent with IP helper, or there's a local DHCP server, doesn't matter. All right, that's bad. That's really bad. So how do we solve that? The way we solve that is we don't allow the defaults for our ports. Let me stop this attack real quick. So I'm going to hit X, and I'll see I'm going to go to context sensitive help here. I'm going to hit question mark, and there should be one, kill all running attacks, K, capital K, which is right there. So that's what I'm going to do. So Q to kill that menu, and then Shift K, and then Y to confirm. Great, I'm going to stop the attack. The way to solve this is we need to tell our ports and configure them from the get-go that they cannot be dynamically negotiating trunking. And there's a few ways of doing that. One is if you set it to be an access port, switch port mode access, it's over. Great. Or if you want it to be a trunk, you set it to be a trunk and you also say no negotiate. So it won't bother having the ability to run DTP on that port. And then also I'd recommend that if you have a new switch, by default, maybe put all the ports into some VLAN you're not using, like VLAN 999 or something that goes nowhere, has no access, and also by default shut down your ports. So if they're all shut down, they're all defaulting to some VLAN that goes nowhere, and you've done a switch port mode access, which turns off DTP, then the hacker using the same technique won't have success. So we can demonstrate that. Let's do a config T. I'm going to default that interface. Default. Oh, we can do it. Do show run interface gig 0/15. There actually isn't too much there. That's the full config for interface 0/15. So if we had some stuff there, you can use the command default space interface gig 0, and it just defaults it back to it starting the way it was when it came from the factory as far as configuration is concerned. Let's also do this. Let's go to interface gig 0/15. I'm going to just bounce it. I'm going to do shut. And then I've turned off the attacks. When he comes back up, he won't be in it. Actually, while it's down, let's go ahead and do the configuration. So we can put him in VLAN 999. If that VLAN didn't exist, it would create it for us. Huh, interesting. Did I have a VLAN 999? Anyway, so we can create a VLAN 999, put that, and then we'll do a switch port. Oh, dang. Yeah. So what I just did was I created VLAN 999, pressed enter, and that took me out of configuration mode. I didn't assign that port to VLAN 999. Rookie mistake. All right, so let's go back. So now that VLAN, as soon as we type in exit, that VLAN now exists because we exited out of VLAN configuration mode. Interface gig 0/15, switch port mode access, and it's that command, boom, that tells this port don't do DTP. We can do a do show interface gig 0/15 followed by the keyword switch port. And right there, where it says negotiation of trunking, off. So the attacker can do DTP messages all day long, but because it's a hard-coded access port, it's not going to negotiate a trunk. And then secondly, switch port access VLAN 999. All right, show VLAN brief. It's a great command. So there we have gig 0/15. We could also do a show interface status. And that would also help very quickly identify that it's in VLAN 999. Disabled, are we not up? Oh, and it shut down. I was like, why is it shut down? Maybe you left it that way. Maybe I did. All right, interface gig 0/. Actually, if we're not using that port, I can just leave it shut down. But even if we bring it back up, the attacker is going to have access to VLAN 999 because we're not using something like 802.1q or 802.1x for authentication. So he'll have access to that VLAN, but there's nobody else on there. So as a result, no harm, no foul. So we can do a show interface status again. And there it is. So if we launch this attack from the Yersinia app, whether we're doing it in the GUI or we're using the this modified tool with just the keyboard, either way, the attacker is not going to have success. So let me check my notes. Thanks for joining me, first of all. I appreciate that. If you are studying for CCNA, we'd love to have you here. Join us. This is not an end-to-end coverage of every possible topic you'll ever need to know for CCNA, but we do go into some detail on what I feel are the meat and potatoes of real-world networks and functions that are related to CCNA 200-301. All right, so I want to show you my sniffer config. We did that with that little like $15 piece of plastic with a little circuit board on there, and how to connect it in so you can listen to traffic going back and forth. It does have a limitation of 100 megabits per second, but it's cheaper. I mean, the other one I did in the previous video, it had where ports 1 and 2 were mirrored over to port 5, and that's where we plugged the Raspberry Pi in, the Kali Pi. that was like $100 and maybe, depending on the day, $100, $110, and it needed power. This solution doesn't need power, and it's like $12 to $15, much cheaper. Okay, secondly, we talked about DTP, Dynamic Trunk Protocol, and the fact that by default, switch ports on many switch models are willing to negotiate a trunk with anybody. And if you have an attacker who's sending the right messages, which looks like he's running DTP as well, and they negotiate a trunk, you've just trunked and given access to all your VLANs that are allowed by default, which are all of them, on a trunk to the attacker. And then third, we identified how to solve it, and that is to turn off DTP. And if it's an access port, it's switch port mode access. That does it. If it is a trunk port, switch port trunk encapsulation.1q, if it supports a couple different flavors, and then switch port mode trunk and one more, depending on your switch. Let me show it to you real quick. And config T, interface gig 0/15, just so you can see it. Make sure it's on screen. It is great. Hi. All right, and we'll do a switch port trunk encapsulation.1q because this switch supports a couple, and switch port mode trunk. But check this out. Even with switch port mode trunk, do show interface gig 0/15 switch port. Trust me, switch port. Look at this. Negotiation of trunking on. So it's not just hard coding it as a trunk. It's also doing this. Switch port no negotiate. And then with that switch port no negotiate, then if we do the interface, look at it, now the negotiation of trunking is off. And now anything can connect on the other side, an attacker, whatever, and it will not negotiate. Well, it's not going to negotiate a trunk, but we just told it to be a trunk. So we'll set this back to a safe mode, which is shutdown, and switch port mode access, and switch port access VLAN 999. Just like that. All right. So this port is once again secured. Not a bad idea to apply a blanket of security on all your switch ports, and then as you need them, have a process and a set of steps to bring them up, maybe modify port fast on them if you want faster access into the network, or set up port fast as a default, either way, with spanning tree to get faster access into the network by authorized clients. Well, that's it. That's everything I wanted to cover in this video. Hey, thanks for joining me. If you haven't already, please subscribe, and also click on the alert bell so you'll know when new videos come out. If you got any value or enjoyed this video, please click on the thumbs up, because that helps let others know, hey, look, that might be something I want to check out. If you're studying for CCNA or you're studying the basics of networking, I would encourage you to take a look at the master playlist here on the YouTube channel, my Keith Barker YouTube channel. Also, join us in Discord. I'd like to publicly thank the two administrators that have stepped up, and that would be Trevor and Kelvin. They do a fantastic job. And then there's a host of amazing people also acting as moderators. Too many to list at this specific moment, but I'm grateful for all that. After the premieres of these videos, which happen usually 3 times a week, we often get in a voice call room, a voice chat room on the Discord server. I'll put the links in the chat. I'll also put links below so you can join in, and we'd love to chat with you and talk with you and help you in your journey on getting your CCNA or the fundamentals of networking under your belt as a really amazing stepping stone moving forward. So have a great rest of your day, or if it's really late in the evening, have a great night, whatever time zone you're in. And I look forward to seeing you in the next live event. Until then, make it a good one.